Welcome to part 3 of chapter 14, where we look at close relationships in the middle adulthood years. These are the major topics for this section: love and marriage, the empty nest, sibling relationships, and intergenerational relationships. And we'll begin with loving marriage at midlife. As it says here, I'm not going to add too much to what's already here. Security, loyalty, and mutual emotional interest are more important in middle adulthood compared to young adulthood years. Most married individuals are satisfied with their marriages during midlife. And finally, the divorce rate has decreased for young adults, but has increased for middle-aged adults, leading to more gray divorces in middle and later adulthood years. The reasons for this were discussed in another class, and you can read about it in the book. The empty nest and its refilling. The empty nest syndrome refers to a decrease in marital satisfaction after children leave home, after the last child leaves home and the nest becomes empty. This really affects parents that derive considerable satisfaction from their children. That is, it really affects those parents that live through their children, that are living vicariously through them in one way or another. And so if your whole life has been devoted to being a parent to your children, and that has been your main focus, then it can be a really negative and tragic time when the last child leaves home and you have the empty nest. Adults in those circumstances, aren't sure what to do with their time and lives, and depression is somewhat common for those adults. Once again, I'm speaking mainly of adults that really live vicariously through the children. For most parents, though, it turns out that satisfaction increases, life satisfaction as well as marital satisfaction increases after child rearing has ended. There's actually an increase in other types of satisfaction. I mean, these are parents that have other interests in life besides their children. They have other, as I said, interests, but perhaps hobbies or relationships that are important to them. And so they're not affected as negatively by the children leaving home. So once again, what we find is that the empty nest syndrome really affects the parents. Excuse me. Excuse me for that. Really affects the parents that are living vicariously through the children. Those parents that have other interests, relationships besides the children, do better and have increased marital satisfaction when the children leave home. Okay. The refilling of the empty nest has become more common in our current society, where children, move back home during an adult age to live back at home. The major complaint of both parents and children is loss of privacy in this circumstance. It is really important when adult children move back home that the parents and children, really agree to a new set of rules. I mean, things are different than when that child was originally at home, and returning as an adult it's a different set of circumstances, and you really kind of need to sit down and agree to a new set of rules. I mean, can the child drink at home? Can they have visitors at home? Is there any kind of curfew now that they're an adult? I mean, those topics really need to be discussed in order for things to work out well. Sibling relationships and friendships. Okay. Sibling relationships may be extremely close, apathetic, or highly rivalrous. during adult years and middle adulthood years. Um, Usually, siblings that are psychologically close to each other in adulthood tended to be that way in childhood. It's more rare to have sibling closeness in adulthood if they didn't have it in childhood. Typically, those siblings that are not close to begin with in childhood, they're more likely to be distant in adulthood. So you tend to see stability in sibling relationships. If they were close during childhood, they tend to be closer in adulthood. If they were not close in childhood, they tend to be distant in adulthood. Um, okay. And finally, intergenerational relationships. So middle, I mentioned this at an earlier in an earlier video, but I'll come back to it again. Middle-aged adults express responsibility between generations. They are the sandwich generation, or what's also been called the squeezed generation or the overload generation, because they have important roles in both the lives of the young and the old, many times still caring for their own children, and in many cases having to care for their aging parents. And so they're squeezed between the older and younger generations. Um, and that will do it for chapter 14.